so much for joining us today. Before we kick this off, I do want to point out to the audience that we welcome questions. Please utilize the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Type in questions as they come up, and we will get to those at the end of today's discussion. So I'd now like to turn this over to Steven Saltzstein, Forest Family Office's CEO.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As you just heard Steve and I in our conversation, just talking about, one of the things that has popped up basically with the understanding that AI is a revolutionary technology on top of a technology is the incredible need for power production, electron production as a means to win kind of a little bit of a new global Cold War here. But before we get into these grandiose designs and dreams, we could just talk about plain old power generation and how Steven and Tamás are doing this, in my opinion, in a incredibly complementary way to what's going on with the grid, etc. So Steven, just to begin with, if you don't mind, just tell us what RheEnergise does.
Yeah, so fundamentally we're in the category of long duration energy storage. So we store energy, we have a solution. You can imagine it like a battery. The difference is, rather than being electrochemical, which is what a battery is, we're electromechanical. So it's a different way of storing it. So we create gravitational potential. We pump our high density fluid up the hill, and while energy is cheap, and then when energy gets more expensive, you release it back down the hill, regenerate through a turbine. It's based on the oldest form of energy storage there is, which is pumped hydro, which has been around for over 100 years. I think the oldest still operating project is having its 120th birthday in Switzerland this year.
Wow.
Of pumped hydro, and it's still operating. And we're fundamentally doing the same thing, but rather using water as the working fluid, we've got a fluid that is 2.5 times denser. So imagine it like a battery in a hill. That's what.
Yeah, and so just to give people a better sense, if I look at the picture behind you, your screensaver, essentially it's almost like a small ski slope. That can you just kind of use that visual as a way to kind of describe exactly how it works?
Yeah, there are just a few sort of fundamental components to it. So at the bottom of the hill, we have a reservoir that contains the high density fluid. Next to that, we have a powerhouse where the pumps and turbines sit. And Tamás has got an example of the fluid that he's holding up. I'll keep going.
It's the first time I've seen the fluid. Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool.
It's really heavy.
Is it? Yeah, that's funny. Right.
It is misleadingly heavy. Steven's just
and so it's funny, like if I go back to 10th grade chemistry class and I would hold a beaker of mercury, which was incredibly dense and incredibly heavy. I mean, it's kind of like something along those lines, I guess, in a way. Maybe not as heavy, but
not as heavy. But what Tamás has in his hand, so rather than being what you'd expect it to be the weight of a carton of milk or something like that, but actually it's the weight of 2.5 cartons of milk. That's what it is. So it's
gotcha.
So it's quite hard to imagine. But I should jump back to how it works, shouldn't I? Unless Tamás wants to take over. So next,
sure.
As low reservoir powerhouse with the pumps and turbines. Then going up the hill is a pipe, which you can see here. Going up the hill is a pipe, and then at the top of the hill is another reservoir similar to the one at the bottom. Could be built in the same way, could be built in a different way. On our demonstration project, we have built 2 different ways of building the tank. The bottom one is a concrete tank. The top is made of glass reinforced plastic, large diameter pipes.
And so, all right, so you've already gotten paid on a couple of these projects from the British government, right? I mean, you've already got grants or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So the UK government decided to operate a scheme where effectively they were providing the company with income to build a project. So they gave us a contract to do the R&D and then to build this project. So it's effectively income that we have as a company, and that's in the order of £9.5 million. What's that? $30 million. That sort of level of income that we've had at the company to do the R&D and then build a technology proof. It's the, and I'm going to hand over to Tamás, is what we're aiming to achieve on the technology proof from this project, as he's our CTO. He's going to explain it in much better words than me.
Well, I don't know about better words, but just more words. So yes, the demonstration project, it's 500 kilowatts. So as opposed to 5,000, which is our commercial product modular size. But in every other way, it's a project. It's an HD Hydro project. It has the same function, the software, the hardware, the procurement, the technology, the components, the integration. It's basically a HD Hydro project demonstration. Its really purpose has been to prove and de-risk the technology for investors and for customers, so they can come see, kick the wheels, see this project working. So that's why we've built it. And for ourselves, it's been an amazing process because it's allowed us to mature our R&D work, which is happening here in the lab in Montreal and in our Montreal R&D lab, and actually put it into practice. And the next stop is what we call our first of a kind. This will be a commercial project. This will be, as I said, 5,000 kilowatts, so 5 megawatt modular size. That's a turbine size. We probably put together 2 or even 4 of them, so something like 10 to 20 megawatts per project. And that's our next big stop. And that will be a commercial project. It will have a customer. It'll generate revenue for the customers.
You know, it's funny. We do a lot of work in Silicon Valley, and in Silicon Valley, people are up in arms because in China, they have begun to build their Gen 4 nuclear reactors. And obviously with these nuclear reactors, there's just a tremendous amount of risk. And it just seems to me that like what you guys are doing, while incredibly complex, in many ways is brilliant, because you could probably provide more energy with a much lower risk paradigm.
And quicker. I mean, Stephen started saying this at the beginning, and that's really where we came from. Everything we do is about addressing the fundamental problem, which is actually one of scale. I mean, how do we as a society deliver on that enormous market potential, those $4 trillion worth of energy storage just in the next 14 and a half years? So everything from our technology to our business model is designed to scale. So we deliberately take, as Stephen said, the best of the existing solution, Hydro World, and we leverage that. We grow with that. We make our technology to be compatible with the existing players. We want to work with the existing developers. And that's a key point. I'm going to jump ahead here, but to me, one of the most important things we've done is make our project fit, our product fit into the headspace of renewable energy developers. So same developers that have been so successful in the last 30 years of rolling out wind and solar. They are used to working with projects that are tens of millions of dollars and take a few years to deploy. So we took that basically as the rules of the game. Let's create a technology that they can play with, that they can take and deploy alongside wind, alongside solar in the enormous volumes that we need.
And you keep like, you guys always refer to the concept of long duration energy storage. Can you talk about that a bit? Why that's so important?
Yeah, so what we see in the world at the moment, and the last 10 years in particular, is the deployment of lithium-ion batteries onto the grid. And what these are fantastic as, and they are great technology, that we're not, and we don't really see them as competition so much, but they're fantastic at doing grid balancing exercises. And what we would call them as a short duration energy storage asset. Most of what's been deployed today is 1-2 hours. There are a few that are going up to 4-hour duration, and they do fantastic services. But if you really want to take the next stage in the transition to sort of renewable zero carbon energy, you actually need to bridge the gap from when the sun sets to when the sun rises. And that's not it's not a 2-hour gap. It's a 16-hour gap or thereabouts. And it's
Sure.
And it's got 2 peaks in it. It's got an evening peak and it's got a morning peak. And those 2 peak hours are on a grid dominated by solar is probably in the order of 6 hours total. But then there's still an element overnight, though. Even though you haven't got those peaks, you still got to. There's lots of things that operate overnight, and the fridges in your house to the charging your EV and whatever else it might be. And so you've got 16 hours where you've still got to supply power with two peaks in it and a longer sort of lower middle bit. And that's exactly what we aim to do. Is so battery short duration. What we're doing is sitting in what we would probably call actually the medium duration part of the market, which is really that 4 to maybe up to 20 hours. And this is the day in, day out cycling of solar, or the twice weekly cycling of wind power. So solar you get every day. Wind systems, they have on average a twice per week cycle. So the wind goes up, and so you need a slightly longer duration. The peaks and the troughs are longer. So that's why you need so in somewhere like the UK, our grid will become dominated by wind. While in southern United States, it's going to be dominated by solar. So you'd have a shorter duration need in that medium duration category than you would in Texas compared to somewhere like the UK, which will be slightly longer. What we don't do is we're not an interseasonal storage. So we don't collect loads of energy during the winter and save it till the summer, or vice versa. That's a different type of technology that would need to be that part of it. But the part of the market that we're in is the volume part of the market. So in that 4 to 20 hours is probably 65 to 70% of the total energy volume that you need trading. So that's where the money is, because that's where the volume part of the market is, and that's the bit that we're looking to solve. And that's the next part of the transition to renewable energy as well. Short duration is solved, medium duration is not solved, other than traditional pumped hydro, and that just takes 2 decades to build. So it's not really a solution, which is the similar sort of, you mentioned nuclear, similar sort of timescales to nuclear. Realistically, to roll out new nuclear, it's from where we are today, it's 20 years. And even with nuclear, you still need energy storage, because it's got this flat profile. So it delivers too much at night. So if you do loads of nuclear, too much at night, so you've got to store that too much for daytime use, which is why in the US and the UK and lots of Europe, you have pumped hydro storage, because it was to balance the nuclear.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. So
I think that's a very important point to make, Stephen, is that the purpose of energy storage is to bridge the mismatch between the intermittent renewables and the demand, and they don't line up. But even without intermittent renewables, there's still a need for energy storage. So here in Quebec, we're mostly hydropower. Hydropower has something in common with nuclear power, and that's designed. So its economic sweet point is pretty much constant power output. That's where it makes the best economic sense. So we have this crazy problem in Quebec where on very cold days, typically in the winter, the wind is blowing and all the houses are electrically heated. The energy consumption, power consumption in that instant goes through the roof beyond what the network can supply. So Hydro-Quebec, at that point, is desperately buying in electricity from the northeastern US, from Ontario, from New Brunswick, because they just don't have enough electricity. So even in Quebec, where we are 90-something% hydropower, very low cost electricity, there's a huge need for energy storage. And that story repeats itself around the world. And that's where this amazing $4 trillion opportunity is really coming from. It's sort of really looking at globally the need for energy storage to really make our electrified grids, the future, what we call the energy transition, work.
Right. Yeah, great. So who came up with this idea? I mean, I guess it's so there's kind of the original energy storage that Stephen, you said is 120 years old, but can you talk to me about how, who came up with the idea, how you guys modernized it and truly made it effective for
and it's quite a nice story actually, and the story involves both of us. So I've been going to energy conferences, and people were talking about the energy transition, wind and solar, intermittent, need energy storage, and the solution to energy storage was batteries. No one talked about anything else, nothing else. And I just sat there scratching my head and thinking, but surely you've got to be thinking at least about pumped hydropower, because 98% of the world's energy storage, when measured by energy stored, is hydropower. pumped hydropower, and it still is. Batteries still only got a fraction of the volume, growing as a percentage, but it's still a fraction. And so the question came up and said, the equation behind how, or the physics behind how hydropower works is quite straightforward. And so I just, rang up Tamás. Was it a phone call or was it an email? I can't remember what it was. And they go, I've got this idea. If you change the density of the fluid, wouldn't that fundamentally change everything? And could it be done? And Tamás replied saying, I'm in London next week. Let's meet up and talk about it. Over to you. And so we met up at a place called the German Gymnasium, which is actually a restaurant, strangely enough.
By King's Cross, yeah.
In King's Cross. Very good restaurant, by the way. I'll just plug them there. So if you're there, it's worth visiting. And then we had the conversation where we sort of started talking about it. Tamás, do you want to add to that?
Well, only that I sort of rolled my eyes when Stephen said this. I was like, okay, Stephen, sure. And then we started scratching it and looking at it. And I was like, well, it could work. And really, for me, there was two shoe drops. The first shoe drop happened sometime in 2018, 2019. The very first thing we did was we got funding from the UK government to do the basic research, fundamental science, the really early low-level stuff. And we figured out that, holy cow, there is a fluid that has high enough density. And this is a big point. It's not just, 10% more dense or 15% more dense. This is 2.5 times the dense of water. Right? That's a big, big change. And not only do we have a fluid that can be that dense, it can meet all the other requirements. It's environmentally benign, it's low viscosity, so high efficiency in the turbine, and most of all, low cost. So that was a game changer. We're like, oh my God, maybe Stephen's not crazy. You can do this. So we started down that route. And then the second shoe drop, when we had that realization early
Tamás,
on.
Tamás, do you make that fluid? Do you guys manufacture that fluid? Okay.
We spend a lot of our time figuring out how to manufacture this fluid cheaply, large volumes to really make it work. So that's a big part of our IP, a big part of our internal IP is the knowledge on how to create this fluid, not just once off, not just in the lab, but at scale for customers in markets around the world at the lowest cost point possible. Trading off all of these things I mentioned. So stability, viscosity, cost, density, all of those things have to be traded off to find the best solution. And then we have to design all of the hardware to go around it. So the turbine, yes, it's based on conventional hydro technology, but we had to adapt it to work with this fluid because the fluid's got a bigger density, it's got a different viscous profile. So that story multiplied across the entire system is our technology and our IP portfolio. The fluid and the hardware to use it in the application of pumped hydro. And I'm actually kind of segueing back into my second shoe drop statement here, because the whole process of doing this unlocked a completely new way of using what we call pumped hydro storage with our high density hydro, precisely because we could now use hills instead of mountains because of this high density. The next thing we realized is like, holy cow, there are thousands and thousands of times more hills than there are mountains. And that really led to this sort of virtuous spiral of positive feedback because there's a lot of site potential. Developers can make the projects smaller and quicker. They can afford to develop them in parallel. We can afford to make them modular. Big thing about conventional hydro is each project is custom and unique. Each project is a project on its own. They design their own turbine, they design their own powerhouse, they design all the details. They reinvent the wheel each time. We want to move to a completely different paradigm where you basically have a modular HD hydro powerhouse, and we drop that in to all of the projects because they're more or less the same, and we can afford to do that because there's so many project opportunities. So that was a second shoe that dropped, and I was like, oh my God, not only can we actually solve this problem of scale, that there's really is a potential for really moving the needle on this, I keep coming back to this, the $4 trillion opportunity. I love that data point.
It's a heck of a TAM, I'll tell you that much. So
tell
me this, yeah. I mean, once you have the funding that you need, like, what's the biggest challenge?
Oh, sorry, someone's phoning me. So I think fundamentally, what there's a sort of engineering handle that we have to turn and things like that, and the fundraising handle that we have to turn. but fundamentally, the challenges come up to sort of securing supply chain and the scaling of it is really when, again, the 4 trillion sort of market opportunity in 15, going from where we are today to even a few percentage of that is just a phenomenally huge challenge. And it's so the challenge is really about scaling, which when you dig into it, it's about recruiting the right people fast enough. The challenge is going to be about recruiting enough people fast enough with the right skills and that enable you to make those project partnerships. So our business model is to be a solution provider. We don't want to have a team in Chile that are building projects and another team in Poland and another team in Sri Lanka. That would be impossible to scale across the world globally. Where if you're building, so we want to leverage the existing knowledge of people who already build projects in Sri Lanka or Poland or Texas, and go, we want to partner with you. Here's our solution. We're effectively providing a solution in a box, or these elements of it in a box, a big box. And you go ahead and build it, and we'll be the solution provider. We'll tell you what you need to know, which is unique about our product, what's specific, and what you can buy off the shelf from other places. And that's what we're looking to do. And but by doing that, we can have
So is that a licensing model, or is it, and this might be a little bit inside baseball, or is it a franchising model?
It's probably it's neither actually, but it's probably more akin to a franchising model. So we describe it as a solution provider, a service provider, and there are 3 parts to our income stack. The first one is when our customers are developing a project, we're providing them with consultancy service to make sure it's designed and then built correctly, and telling them the sort of bits of the supply chain that they really need to think about and where to get those from, and probably also providing templated sort of solutions that we know are low cost and easy to implement. So that's the sort of the consultancy phase. When it's being built, we are effectively the provider of the equipment that goes into the powerhouse. So we don't want to manufacture those. We want to have manufacturing partners, OEMs that are providing the components. We integrate it into a powerhouse. So effectively, our customers, we say we need a box this big that we put all this stuff into. And then once it's operational, we have a operation and maintenance fees, and we have a royalty-based payment at the end. So it's sort of somewhat akin to a franchise, but it's a solution really, rather than, which is probably more common in the energy industry. So in the retail markets, franchising and things like that is much more common, but in energy, vertically integrated utility will come to someone and say, we need this, provide us a solution for it, and so you integrate the solution on their behalf. So that's what we're doing.
So then, tell me about your patent portfolio. Like, yeah. And are there a bunch more that you guys need to grab? Are you done?
I'll take this one. Oh God. So we have at the moment 14 patent families. And so a family is basically one idea. It has multiple patents within each family in different jurisdictions. And sometimes there's more than one patent covering a family. The approach we've taken here is something I touched on already. Like our core strategy about achieving scale was leveraging the existing hydro industry. It touches on what Stephen was just explaining about how we grow and scale our business. We don't want to be manufacturing turbines, for example, but we need to know how to make a high density turbine. So that's what we focused on. As an example, high density turbine, we went through the whole process of taking the existing knowledge out there in hydro, the way they make their turbines, testing with our fluid. This particular case, we identified 1 or 2 areas where we needed to make relatively small changes. We patented those. And then we actually, for the demonstration project in the UK, we actually did what we said we're doing. We took the turbine design to an existing hydro manufacturer and said, can you build this? And they said, yeah, of course we can. It's very similar to what we've done before. And they built it. But we own the IP on the bit that makes it different than existing turbines. And so that's some IP that we can then license to other manufacturers to make our turbines for us. And it's this story repeated across the system: turbines, pumps, power conversion valves, fluid management systems, the way we deal at the system level design. So at the moment, like I said, we have 14 patent families, which is as far as we've gotten so far in our patenting journey, but there's a lot more to go. And really, we're going through that process now. So I said at the beginning, we've gone from being in the lab, going way back to the beginning. We did the very early science stuff, like before the pandemic, we were working on basic science stuff. And then here in Montreal, we did a lot of the detailed fundamentals and lab-based R&D. And then we started implementing it at this demonstration project over the last 2.5 years. And that process has been a watershed for IP, because as you're implementing these ideas and making them come real, it becomes very apparent where the innovation is. And we've gone through a process where we capture that innovation, describe it, write it up, patent it. But as you might be aware, patenting is time-consuming and expensive, which is to say we still have a lot of patents to come.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. Stephen, can you talk to me about like the growth of data centers and where this idea fits in with that? And, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's in the news all the time, and some of these mega data centers and just how large they are and how much power they need, and how the profile of the power is, fairly constant 24/7. It depends on the type of data center. It does rise in the day or not, but where they're located. Some needs to be close to people. Others can be miles away in the country, or even in different countries. But fundamentally, they all need a huge amount of power. The challenge across the world is, how do you create the power for these systems? That most power grids were not designed with this sort of level of new infrastructure going in so quickly, so they tend to become you need the data center and a power solution. So and the data centers, to be honest, they're scrabbling for anything. The lead time on a gas engine is probably already 2032 for some of the size of the data center. So 8 years, and those are extending. The number of manufacturers that make the sort of the gas turbines at that sort of scale are relatively small. There's only a handful in the world, and so rather than building a new production line, they'll just put the prices up and solve their problems that way. And so data centers are looking at small nuclear reactors. They're looking at any solution they can get, but fundamentally the solution you can deploy quickly is renewables, but it doesn't meet their demand profile for the data center. So you've got to sort it out. And that's exactly where we come in. And they have a day in, day out problem in that part of the market that I talked about earlier, which is 60 to 75% of the market. For a data center, it's probably 90% of their need. Actually, it's the vast majority of, so we're in the day in, day out solution for that. And just the market is huge. I think that probably $4 trillion market was sort of written down before the realization on the growth of data centers was written.
Stephen, it's worth bringing up the headline that was in the news just maybe 2 weeks ago, where Google committed to purchasing long-duration energy storage from a company called Energy Dome, who I guess probably technically are competitors in that they're in the long-duration energy storage space. But my line here often is that I don't really see, yes, they're a competitor, but we're in a world where there's just not enough solutions. And coming back to that point, Google themselves said they want to replicate that arrangement they had, which is, it's a massive contract with Energy Dome. They want to do that with other energy storage companies. And of course, Google is just one of the tech companies. There's Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, plus all of the AI companies. This is enormous. And one of the things I say, going back, because I'm going to bring it up again, the $4 trillion picture over the next 15, 14 years, right? What that really means is that one of the things I love to highlight is it's enormous. No one technology can really address it all. There's more need than there is supply for the foreseeable future. But at the same time, developing a company and a solution like ours takes time. And the same thing is true of all of the other competitors, whether it's Energy Dome or Battery People or Flow Batteries. And I like to point out that, when you think about that opportunity that's in the road ahead of everyone, that $4 trillion, all of those data centers, all of those big Meta, Amazon companies and the deals that are yet to come, it's going to be amongst the people like RheEnergise who are currently at the stage where we are. right? It's not going to be the new technology that is still hasn't started yet. It's people like RheEnergise and the maybe 24 max. There's maybe 24 companies like us. I don't know. Maybe there's only like a dozen. I don't even know who can really play in the long duration energy storage space. It's going to be amongst this field. These are the people that are going to be raking in those contracts and serving that market over the next 15 years. Very exciting.
So, Tamás, like how soon do you guys get to scale? And what are the first projects?
Well, so I touched on this earlier already. I said sort of, our demonstration project is effectively complete in the UK, and we're now looking to line up our first of a kind. So we've set ourselves a 3-year time frame from January. I've got a few more months to go. So by the end of 2028, we intend to have our first of a kind project. Stephen is very correct and always pointing out that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. We probably will have a few projects we're looking to develop at once. Those are the early, pace setters, I guess, for the commercial traction. Once those early commercial projects are nearing completion, by then we expect to have the very large follow-on of the pipeline, of the commercial pipeline. And so you see that in our deck. If Graham, our CFO, and our third co-founder were here, he would talk eloquently about that, about what sort of the runway looks like and where that growth is coming from. It's really coming from that pipeline in the the end of this decade and by the beginning of the next decade. So that's why we're very bullish about this. We talk about the goal of being the phrase sometimes uses a unicorn, but a green unicorn. But that's just really speaking to the point that this is such an enormous market opportunity and scale that's where that's coming from. We need to now commercialize, and we need to just start rolling out, and that needs capital.
By the way, all those kind of headline customers you mentioned, you did not mention DeepSeek, right? Yes. which is China's AI, and there's no secret their quest for electrons. So no doubt. Hey, we have a bunch of audience questions.
Sector.
Right. No, I agree. It's funny. It's almost icing on the cake, right?
It's icing on the cake. Yeah. It's a big icing. It's a once in a generational burst in energy consumption. But it's
just before we go and talking about the energy demand, when you look at the sort of projection of any demand growth, data centers they're a notable proportion of it, probably around a third. But actually there's 2/3 which are coming from the electrification of industry and things like mining. So in terms of total global energy consumption, mining uses nearly 10% of total global energy, and it's largely not electrified. And so the electrification of that with energy storage is just, a huge market on its own. If we just solve 2% of, no, not 2%, but 20% of the mining problem, so 2% of the total, that's a unicorn many times over. Let
me add one to you, which is I think 2 days ago, Ford Motor Company basically announced an entire new production facility for electric vehicles, which I was actually surprised to see. But really what that means is we need the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which is, another opportunity for you guys.
Yeah. We've already had inquiries where electric vehicle charging have sort of capacity for 2 hours of storage, but they can see the need coming behind, that they want a longer duration solution, sort of effectively sitting behind the battery. They've put this battery in the existing charging stations to go, okay, we can see the demand growth in electric vehicles. We're going to need more capacity in this connection that we already have. What are the solutions for that? We could add more batteries, or we could do something else that is lower cost for longer duration, and that's where we come in. So the opportunities are just immense.
All right, I don't want to monopolize the discussion, Callie. There's a bunch of questions, so I'm going to let you take it away.
Great, thank you so much. And some of these you may have touched on, so I apologize if it's repetitive, but these are from the audience. So in cost and performance terms, how do you stack up against lithium ion and other long duration storage solutions for 6 to 10 plus hours?
I'll take that one. So we've done a lot of work on sort of levelized cost of storage, and including the sort of the projections on the decline of lithium ion sort of battery cell stacks and things like that. And up to around 3.5 hours of storage on a levelized cost of storage basis, which is the sort of usual way of measuring these things, lithium-ion batteries are more cost-effective than us. The tipping point is around 3.5, maybe 4 hours, depends on the market and the use case a little bit, but certainly longer than 4 hours. We're a more cost-effective solution. By the time you get to around 8 hours, we're half the cost of lithium-ion batteries on a levelized cost of storage basis. And we're also asked, what is the, lithium-ion batteries have got this huge cost down curve, which is true. They still are doing that, but it's really the cell stacks, which is today only 40% of the total project cost. So yes, there's a cost down trajectory in this part of it, but even if they halve that part of it, you've still got 80% of the total project's cost still there. And we'll have our own cost down pathway as well. Tamás was talking about the commoditization, we're powerhouse in a box effectively, and that commoditization journey gives us equivalent opportunities for cost down over time.
Thank you. And what's the typical system lifespan, and how does that impact levelized cost of storage?
Do you want to take the system lifetime and I'll take the impact bit, Tamás?
Sure. So we talk about a 50+ year lifespan. So 50 years plus hints at the fact that there isn't anything that really runs out at 50 years. So we really talk about a 50-year lifespan where it's a sustainable, there's a plan for sustaining the asset for 50 years. As Stephen alluded to, conventional pumped hydro, 100 years and still kicking. It's possible to maintain for a long time, but we've done engineering to make sure that there's a pathway for doing that. So first and foremost, the question people always ask, the fluid, does this thing degrade with time? And the answer is no. We've engineered so that it does have that lifespan potential. Hardware, turbines, valves, they do wear out, but so does conventional pumped hydro. And we as an industry know how to deal with that. So there's components you replace on 20, 30-year cycles. So that's what we're getting at, this 50-year life cycles plus. And Stephen?
And then on the sort of the cost question, sometimes it's actually a question you have to ask your customer, which is about what is their modeling time period, what is their discounted cash flow period so it's so when you're doing a levelized cost of storage model, you could pick 10 years to do your analysis against 20, 40, 100. The years after about 40 make very little difference because of the way the discounted value of money works. But we tend to model when we're talking to developers, it's usually a 20 to 40 year sort of modeling, and we're highly economic. That's the half the cost of lithium-ion battery. If you did a 5-year model, that would skew in the favor of lithium-ion batteries, because what you get with lithium-ion batteries at year 10 or 12, or however our customers are modeling that replacement period, you've got a significant cost at that sort of 10 to 12 year point, so if you're modeling in less than that, it makes if you're modeling more than that, it changes the numbers in effect. So we tend to model 20 or 40 years depending who we're talking to.
Great. And what barriers exist for others to replicate your fluid technology? And just can you talk a little bit about your IP portfolio?
I think that's one.
Talk a little bit more about that, yeah, and then Stephen, feel free to pipe in at the end. So we touched on already the 14 patents and counting. Specifically around the fluid, there's an enormous body of knowledge, and IP refers to a lot more than just patents, right? So the patent is I don't want to use the icing on the cake word, we already use that one. The patent is sort of the little trophy that you get at the end, but the whole journey is about the knowledge that we have. So for example, we don't actually talk about our fluid as being a product, but rather a platform technology, because what we've developed actually is the know-how of how to create a suitable high-density fluid for a given mineral supply chain. And I'm being vague there because this is important. We can use many different minerals, and in fact, combinations of minerals. And why do we do that? Because we've discovered that's the route to the lowest supply cost of the weighting agent. So the weighting agent and the fluid is a relatively large portion of the total cost stack of a project. And so it's one of the biggest levers we can pull in terms of economics. So we're really focused on reducing the cost of the fluid. But along this journey then, we've learned how to do that, how to really take It sounds simple, but it's actually very complicated. Mineral potential, supply chain potential, and how to go through the journey to deliver fluid into a project, and what is required to do that. And this story, again, replicated across the entire system. There's a lot of knowledge that goes in there. In addition to the patents, therefore, we have this sort of corporate or sort of company knowledge that really is unique to us. And we haven't taken our foot off the gas. We've been innovating and learning nonstop at full speed for 5 years. If somebody wanted to catch up to us, even if they had access to us, it would take them years to sort of catch up to us. And we're not planning on taking our foot off the gas anytime soon.
Great. And could your solution plus renewables solve the energy to power a typical data center, or would it still need traditional power as well?
It's actually an economic question rather than a technical question.
Technical answer is yes, but economically.
Economically, what you find is that you've somehow got to, if you are off grid, not connected to the sort of main power grid, or even if you are, there's typically 3-4% of your total energy generation that you need to take from somewhere else because you have these lows or bad weather systems, or or just something that means that you can't do it for 365 days a year. It's more like 350 days a year or something like that, and so you do need solutions for that other bit from an economic perspective. And there are many ways of doing that. The simplest way is you're connected to the grid and you just accept those higher power prices for that period of time from the grid. That's the lowest cost way of doing it. You can do it with a genset or a gas engine or something for those periods, but that becomes so it's an economic question rather than a technical question.
Great. And how do you compare with the vanadium redox batteries?
Yeah, and I'm going to speak from my mind. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors around what they're achieving in terms of flow batteries at the moment, and there are the analysis that is sort of more publicly available or has been around for a little while is that on a levelized cost of storage basis, we're 30% of the cost. It's that sort of. I mean, our operational profile is somewhat similar, but we're significantly below them. They're above lithium-ion batteries at that sort of 8-10 hour duration. There are sort of rumors, and particularly in the parts of the industry that are really pro flow batteries, that they've solved that. Their costs are a quarter of what there is sort of rumors are out there, but we haven't seen it, haven't seen third-party audit on that sort of thing. So I don't know is the actual answer, but it doesn't seem likely that they've really cracked that bit. Tamás, you or some of your engineers may have looked at this more recently than I have.
No, I think you're at the crux of it there, Stephen. I mean, I take a different tack too. I always say this point, I said it already once, but the market is so enormous that the world where a RheEnergise salesperson or vanadium flow battery salesperson are sweating in front of a customer trying to decide who'll get that one job, that's a long way away. But putting that to one side, I think one of the other unique, there's a lot that goes into the customer's decision making. And so just to pick up at another one, a great feature of high density hydro is that roughly half the project cost is spent locally, like local contractors, local consultants and engineers. And that's a huge plus, right? Because in battery world, a lot of the money flows out to factories the far distant land. It's much easier to sell it, if you're comparing two options and you've got an option where, hey, look, half the money stays locally and creates jobs and economic development locally. It's a big win. People love that. So there's lots of different things to consider when not just the economics. Great.
Are you collaborating with utilities, EPC firms, or financiers to accelerate deployment? Can you provide any details on any partnerships?
Yeah, the short answer is yes to all of that. We can only. There are some in the public domain, like Colbún, which is the Chilean utility, So that's in the public domain. There's other things in the public domain with some mining companies where we've signed MOUs and published them. Also, a company in the UK, Mercia Power Response, which are transitioning from their gas peaking plant portfolio to a renewable or alternative solutions for flexibility. So that's in the public domain. So the simple answer is yes, we talk to there aren't many sort of vertically integrated utilities that you probably know that we haven't been speaking to, who don't know who we are at some point in the business, in their business.
So like in the US, we're closely talking to, yes, being vague, but we're very much, there's opportunities in the South, which is a more utility based, but then sort of a across the continent developer who's very actively looking at opportunities, and then sort of an international developer we're working with. So yes is the short answer, and we always need more of that. I mean, that's really the route to our scaling world, is to partner with these strategic partners, the utilities, the EPCs as you identified them, the developers, because that's the way you get, that's our business model.
Great, thank you. So let's get into some of the financial questions. So what is the size, structure, and timing of your current raise? And how will those funds specifically drive your North American growth?
And that's a great question. So the round that we're working towards at the moment, we've called our Series A, or our first institutional round, which covers a broad spectrum. So certainly it's in the wheelhouse of family offices in particular. That's in the order of $15 to $20 million. So our target is in the $15 million sort of range. The max we'd like to take in that Series A is around the $20 million, maybe a little bit more. So that's the scale of it. We're effectively doing a soft launch at the moment for that, and you know, if we could first close before the end of the year, that would be great. But we're realistic; it's probably going to take a little bit longer. So that's the timing and the scale of it. Did I answer that fully? It felt quite short. But
there's a use of funds question. We've touched on that as well. You know, as we're maybe a different way to touch on that is that we talked about the demonstrator project and the first of a kind commercial project. In a nutshell, that's what the Series A funding is about. It's about growth phase, and sort of represents a step change in the company's life. So currently we're 32 people as an organization, 20 of them here in Montreal and 12 of them in the UK when we're building the demonstrator. We need to grow to be an organization that can deliver commercial projects. So a lot of that money is about both commercializing our technology, so maturing the technology from being a demonstrator all the way to the level where it needs to be, so that we can put it into customers' hand and they can be happy. So that's one use of funds, but also to grow the organization in terms of being able to deliver, right? So that growth phase, being able to deliver these projects to customers on our commercial side and our operational sides.
Great, thank you. And can you talk a little bit about how you measure and report your climate and social benefits to investors?
Yeah, we, for a while now, we've been tracking. I wasn't expecting this question. We don't get it very often, but for a while we've been tracking our own internal emissions and the emissions from the demonstration project we're doing. But probably the metric that we're sort of project forward the most is CO2 equivalent savings. You know, and our ambition really is to become part of the 0.5 gigaton and per annum carbon avoidance club. I'm not sure I described that quite right. Tamás might correct me.
I think we know what you're saying. Yes, that.
Yeah, but where you've deployed enough projects globally that you have effectively help the energy system avoid 0.5 gigaton per annum of CO2 equivalent emissions. So that's the trajectory we're on.
Fundamentally, what we're doing is we're enabling the transition from a carbon-intensive grid to a carbon-free grid. So the leverage here is great. That's a very big number. And then because of the size, the scale of the problem, it's also great. And so that's why we get to these large gigatons. And we've already touched on other ESG metrics. So that's the obvious one is look, we're really enabling the energy transition and everything that brings in terms of access to plentiful, clean energy. So all those ESG goals that go with that. But then the other one we also touched on was sort of economic development. I think that's underplayed by us a lot, but it's huge. If 50% of what you're spending on a HD hydro project is local economic development, it also suddenly becomes a great tool for economic development, right? So we want to encourage and help around the world, societies and grids transition. What a great way to do that.
And speaking of around the world, any collaborations with India and or Israel?
We do have one of our family offices is from India. So one of our investors is Indian. They have made some introductions to us for things like one of the Indian power utilities, and India is quite a hard market to work in. You know, it's a huge opportunity, hard market to work in. We've recognized that to do that market justice, we would need to dedicate a team to do that. In reality, we would probably need to have a wholly owned subsidiary, which was in India, even if it was staffed quite lightly to really address that market. Israel, we talk to Israelis, but have no sort of real direct contact or anything much in the pipeline that we have had interest. There are tech companies which provide interesting solutions out of Israel, but there's nothing that sort of really.
And Stephen, you can talk about the suitability of our product for that climate.
Absolutely, yeah. That is a very good point. So we tend to focus on lower hills, smaller projects, but one of the other things that we really bring is just the scaling opportunity that we bring to the market. Because when you look at traditional pumped hydro and you overlay that with rainfall, you find nearly all of the pumped hydro projects in locations of the world with high rainfall. So in the UK, we only really get pumped hydro projects on the western side, not on the eastern side, because that's where more rain is, and that's replicated across the world. And when you measure it by land mass, it's something around 25% of the world's land mass has high enough rainfall for pumped hydro. So there's 75% which doesn't, and that's our market as well. Because we have a closed loop system, we can control things like evaporation, and so Southern United States, Mexico, Middle East, Israel, Australia, all those parts of the world where there isn't enough water, that's our market.
And on the Indian point, going back to India, the other thing we've been doing in India is looking at the mineral supply chain. So, we don't talk about this enough, but for us, the mineral supply chain is a key portion of our magic. And so we've actually, what are the barriers we spent a lot of time working with is understanding, exploring the supply of the mineral from India, because it's a big producer and can become an even bigger producer. So that's one other connection we have there.
Great. Well, we have time for one more question. And can you just talk about your likely path to liquidity, strategic acquisition, IPO, project level financing? Where do you see this going?
We actually think that the most likely route to an exit is probably a strategic buyer, probably from our supply chain, either upstream or downstream. Or you have seen in the past that they sometimes buy as a joint venture, that there's sort of a trading house at one end and a supplier of something from the other, and they sort of create they see the advantage of joint venture, which then they often IPO. But is sometimes a route to it. We think that's the more likely. If that doesn't materialize, sort of it doesn't seem to be materializing in the latter part of this decade, then that's when we'd probably consider about, is IPO the right opportunity for us?
I love the idea of an IPO. It's a classic model, isn't it, where we can prove the scalability. By the time we can prove the scalability, the market size is obvious to everyone, and you just need access to capital. It's a great application of IPO, isn't it, to bring in capital to scale and exploit that opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you to everyone. And for those of you that have additional questions, everyone out there has my email address. I'm happy to introduce you to the team here at RheEnergise. Stephen, I do want to turn it back over to you for any final words before we close out. And that would be Stephen Crosher.
Crosher. Other final words. I think in summary, the one thing that we didn't talk about was just how good our team was. That Tamás quite often talks about that you need a great team, but you don't only need a team that has engineering expertise. You need a team with the capability to deliver. And I think that's what we've, beyond the sort of technology and the commercial development and the commercial pipeline we've been developing, the proof of our ability to deliver physical things on the ground is actually a sort of a real strength that we have as a company. And then, you know, to summarize much of the other things is, you know, it is a huge market. You know, there will be a number of unicorns in this market. You know, we think we're in a place where we can really become one of those green unicorns. Our product really fits the market space. It's in the headspace of our customers, and we get a lot of inbound inquiries, which I'd love to talk longer about. So those are probably the key things, and we're very open to one-on-one conversations where, you know, we're building up our data room for this Series A soft launch at the moment. If you're in the UK, you're very welcome to visit our demonstration project. Maybe, Callie, we could share a couple of slides after this to everyone who's been on the call, just of the demonstration project.
Oh, yeah. You'll have all of their information, and in turn, you know, yeah, so you can send that out to them. Certainly, that would be great. So, I want to thank everyone for joining, and I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you so much for this wonderful fireside chat.